Let's do this. Take two. All right. Hey folks, welcome to this new video series. This is M365 Code Decode. And today we're going to demystify some concepts like multi-tenanted apps. Now, before we jump into multi-tenancy, into single tenant, stuff like that, let's just first decode what tenant is. So, Bob, over to you.
So I'll bet everybody out there probably knows that Microsoft 365 is a suite of applications that work together, and a lot of them are really familiar, like Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Microsoft Teams is really big these days. SharePoint, huge community around SharePoint, right? A tenant is basically where all of these tools are working together, and they're managed under a single security system called Azure Active Directory. I should probably say a single identity system. So what happens is that each Azure Active Directory and the tools are organized into something called a tenant. So the users who use them are also registered inside of that same Azure AD and part of the same tenant. And so it basically creates a virtual boundary in which all the users and their data and the applications they use are all kind of self-contained, because, you know, Microsoft 365 is a secured environment. It's not like people are sharing all of their business documents and messages and stuff with the whole world. So this is kind of how everything is separated, right? And then there's also the option of having some guest users come in from outside of the tenant. Although we're not going to get into that, it's part of the Azure AD functionality called B2B or business to business that allows other people from other tenants in to collaborate. So that's all well and good, but you've written an app, right?
Yeah.
So your app is running
get to that.
Inside of a tenant, right? And that's really kind of where this whole question comes up. So yeah, so what's the story with your app?
Right. So I have this application. So this app basically is a JavaScript single page application that connects to M365 data in a very secure fashion and get some data out of it in my tenant. And this is something that I've worked on in my developer tenant. And I have to be very honest with you. I have seen the options for multi-tenant apps and stuff, but I really don't understand why I should use a multi-tenant app, or what is the purpose? What is really the use of it, or how to begin? That's something that I'm really finding it hard, or I'm struggling to sort of even make my single tenant app into a multi-tenant app. So these are the questions that I have. How do I start? What are the benefits and things like that? So before we jump into these questions, Bob, what I would do is I would actually show you the app that I have. And then we could probably, I would also make sure that this app runs, and I'll show you how it runs and retrieves data from M365 using the Microsoft Graph API. And then from there, we could start demystifying concept one by one. Does that sound good?
Yeah, let's see the code.
So we have a simple application. We've got the open source, and we would put the link down in the description for you to clone as well. So this is a JavaScript application, a single page application to retrieve M365 data using Microsoft Graph. And all what we are doing here is just showing the username from M365 data. And that's just it. So it's the simplest app that you can find to go ahead and implement this concept. So
great.
I already have it cloned in my machine. So I'm just going to open that up in my Visual Studio Code. So let's just open that. And this is basically the structure, Bob. Like, this is the simplest structure of this project. We've got auth.js file, which is where all the authentication magic happens. And then we have graph.js, which is where we're calling the SDK to get the M365 data. We've got some simple HTML here and very complex welcome message that shows the username. And you also have the UI.js, which is basically, it all ties together and show the UI of this app. And now this README file is, to be honest with you, I've actually gone through this, and I know some of the steps, so I'll probably cheat and will make this a bit more faster. Basically, what we have to do for this application to work in my tenant is I need to register an application in Azure Active Directory, and then using that, I would connect the app to Microsoft Graph Services. So let's just go ahead and do an app registration, and all the steps that you need to do is actually in this application. So I'm just going to speed things up a bit here.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm opening up office.com here, which is the place I go to if I want to get to any apps or any settings or anything in my M365 tenant. And on the left side, you can see the admin gear icon, which is where you would go if you want to go to. So if you want to go to Azure Active Directory and create an application, this is where you would go. So I'm just going to click on that. And that would take me to the other settings, Teams or SharePoint or whatnot. You've got all this in one place. And if you scroll down, you can see here Azure Active Directory. And thanks, Bob. This was a tip from you. I usually just go directly to portal.azure.com, but this is so much easier to browse.
Now, there's always 3 ways to do everything in Microsoft. So
yeah, that's right. All right, so let's jump in and create an application registration for my app. So that's a separate thing, right, Bob? We have a SPA, which is hosted wherever you want to host in cloud, and then you need to do this app registration for your authentication to work with Azure Active Directory.
Right. It's just kind of like a phone app, I guess, where the phone knows kind of like the app has permissions as well as the user. So then that's why you end up having to register the app itself inside of Azure. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's just go ahead and do the app registration. And this is the form where you would put the name of the app. So let's just call it the code. And then it's a single tenant app, and redirect URL. I'm just going to post what is basically HTTP localhost 8080. This is where my app would run locally. So I'm just going to do that and register. That's it.
Makes sense.
Right. So since I already jumped the gun and I know the instructions for getting these configuration into my code to run the to make sure the authentication works, I'm going to copy application, which is the client ID and the directory tenant ID. These are the things that you need to configure. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this one by one. And if you notice, they're actually called application ID, and you have inside client ID, because I think they were called differently before, and they're just trying to, cool.
Yeah, I remember I used to get confused, and it turns out they're the same thing. Application ID and client ID mean the same thing. So,
yep. Cool. So copying the application ID, and I'm just going to come back to the auth.js file. So I can see here, this is where I should put my client ID. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? And then you need your directory ID, which is again your tenant ID, which is also mentioned here, directory ID. So I'm just going to copy that and come back in here.
Nice.
Cool. Awesome. And that should actually be it. And I would be able to run my app at this instance.
Okay.
Let's just see that npm start. Okay, so this is now starting my app locally in port 8080. So it's just going to open up this app for me. This is the button that I needed. And it's asking me for some permission consent. So I'm just going to consent that. It's just reading my basic profile information. I'm okay with that. Just going to accept that, and Cool. So it's asking for more permissions, accept, and yes, I've got my welcome message. Yep. So this is coming straight from M365 data. Now, I also know that now if I have to give this app for you to test, you probably need it in a browsable URL. So I'm just going to use ngrok. And remind me, Bob, we do have a video on ngrok, which is a tool, right?
Yeah, it's a tunneling tool that allows you to put your local host on the internet for testing purposes.
Yeah.
And we'll put a video, if you click in the corner, we'll put a link to that video for everyone.
Awesome. So I already have that set up. So I do have the ngrok set up. I do have a subdomain for it, but you don't really need to have a domain for it. So I'm just going to go ahead and using ngrok. All right. So now that I have this running, I also need to do some other changes because remember, Bob, when we went into our app registration and we had these redirect URLs that you mentioned, we mentioned localhost, but we also need to update this, right? So it needs to be whatever we're going to test.
Yeah, because the login process involves a redirect, so it's going to a browser redirect. So this kind of makes sure that nobody's cheating. It's only will go to the place that the registration allows.
Yeah, that's right. So this is where you make the changes. We have to make changes in here as well as you need to change it in the code because I remember we have that in the
that's right. There it is.
Config file as well. So let's just do that. I'm going to stop my app and update this and restart.
Okay.
Cool. So now my app is restarted. I'm just going to open up a new browser tab and go to the app. So it's now online.
Nice.
So I'm going to sign in. It shows me the same exact data. Now, our main thing that we're going to try out, Bob, is that you're going to go into this URL and try to run my app in your tenant, right?
Yeah, let's try it.
Cool.
So the URL here was https://ngrok.io.
Yep, that's right.
And there it is. I can see it. So the tunnel part is working fine. So let me go ahead and sign in.
Nice.
And I'm Megan Bowen today. So a lot of people pretend to be Megan. Oh, no. The selected account does not exist in my tenant. Or wait, that's your tenant. But anyway, it doesn't work. So I guess that's the problem, right? Because it's your tenant, it's your app, but it's not in your tenant, right? Here we are trying to run it in my tenant, and it's not happy. So let's switch back to you, and maybe we can do something about this.
Exactly. So this is what we want to achieve. Like for me, I would love if I had this app registered once in my tenant, hosted, it's a separate thing. I'm hosted already in my in the cloud. Right. I don't want to keep going back to different tenants or based on different clients. I don't want to go there and ask IT admins or whoever is responsible to go ahead and tweak stuff and change things. I should be able to control this. So this is exactly what I'm trying to achieve.
Right.
So,
it wouldn't be practical to get everybody to register your app. And then what if you wanted to make a change later on? That would be really painful. Now you'd have to go back. Maybe you needed some new setup in your registration, and you have to go back to every customer. So that's not practical. Yeah, I hear you.
It's not. So you have it registered once, and then you want to distribute this app. That's where you want it to be multi-tenant. Now, the question for you, Bob, here is I have no idea how to do this, like how to change the app, both in code and the registration part, and how to make this seamless so that I can distribute this without them actually getting to do like 10 different steps to get this working.
Yeah, totally. Let's do it. It's actually much easier than people think. And so let's go ahead and make the change right now.
Awesome.
So the first step would be to go into your app registration.
Yeah, I'm just going to stop the app.
Good idea.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's go. Actually, we're here. We might as well start here. There's two changes. One of them inside the app is to
Mm-hmm.
change where it says authority and you've got your tenant ID.
Yeah.
Erase your tenant ID and just put the word common.
Okay.
And
Right. That's pretty intuitive. So it's like going to be a
yeah.
common thing.
And that's actually the default, which is what that comment on line 5 is saying, is basically like if you just commented out the authority and left it
Mm-hmm.
as the default, you would get the same result. But for the purpose of illustration to everyone watching, let's leave it as common.
Okay.
And then the other one is in the app. The other change would be in the app registration.
Okay. So I'll go back to the portal where we registered the app. So here we are.
And yeah, there should be a setting in here where you can select. I think it's right there. Yeah, supported
Oh,
account
yeah.
host.
I can see it. Yep.
And
I
so
can
it
choose.
says, yeah, multi-tenant is right there. So it's just a kind of a radio button that you click.
Awesome. Okay. Save.
Yep. And then if you
That's it.
restart the app, that's it. Yeah, it should work.
Okay. 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 That's simpler than I thought. Okay. So how does it all work? Like, I'm curious now to know. So, do I have to give some sort of a script for other people to do some stuff? Like, is that it? Is the app going to handle everything?
Yeah, the app will handle it. Let me show you now. I should be able to go back and do this again. And it turns out
Okay.
that everything is not stored in the app registration. And I'll show you that in a
Okay.
minute. But when I consent to the app, it actually gets stored in my tenant. So this is part of the confusion, is that you've got the app
Yeah.
registration and you've got the permissions in something called service principal. So let me switch back to my share.
Yeah.
And here I am. I'm just going to refresh the screen
Okay.
and sign in. And there it
Okay.
is, right? There's SPA, code decode.
Yep.
It says it's unverified. That just means that
Hmm.
you're not part of the partner network, which means that
Okay.
it hasn't been verified, but that's okay.
We don't
We're
mind.
friends. We're friends,
Yep.
right? Yeah. I could
Yeah,
now.
I know.
What's interesting, I could consent on behalf of my entire organization and my entire tenant because I'm
Hmm.
a tenant admin in my tenant as well. I'm not going to
Okay.
bother with that, but I just wanted to point that out.
So there are other permissions that would need an admin to do stuff, right? So that's
Yeah.
probably where that is.
Oh, and then I need to allow the
Ah,
pop-up.
yep. Allow it. It's just gonna copy your bank details. That's it.
Okay, here we are. So a bit more permission. And that's
Yep.
just the way that it was structured. I remember that single page app, we broke it down.
Oh,
So it asked for a little bit at a time. Hey, here I am. Now I'm impersonating Megan again. But you can see it's working perfectly. Now what
yeah.
happened under the covers is
Hmm.
the inside of Azure Active Directory, if I look under my registrations,
Hmm.
and what was that one called again? Well, anyway, it's not here. I only have two apps
SBA code
registered.
decode.
Yeah, it's not here, right? So
Hmm. Yeah.
because it's registered in your tenant. And
Yes,
so
exactly. Yeah.
a software vendor would do that. They would register it centrally in their tenant. A little
Yeah.
tip here for anyone who's watching, if you are a software vendor, don't put it in the same tenant that you use for your daily work. What if you want to sell that app to another company someday? Or what if the app just has different administrative rules, different admins for the app versus for people just using Microsoft 365 inside your company? It's always better to make a separate tenant just for hosting the app, just for registering the app in production. Anyway,
Right.
there's this other thing which I think is confusingly named.
Hmm.
Enterprise applications is actually where we store these things called service principals. So this is the other half of that registration,
Okay.
if you will. And
Right.
so if I come in here and I look for SPA,
SBA code decode.
there it is.
Yep.
And you can see that this is when I consented and said, yeah, it's okay for this app to have some permissions.
Right.
This is where that actually, this is what actually got created. And so if I come in here to the permissions, you'll see that there was no admin consented. Remember, I didn't allow, right? Now, if the admin wanted to consent for everybody so that they don't get any more pop-ups, you could click right there. And instead, I'm going to go into the user consent. Here are the 3 permissions that I consented to. And here is, looks like one user did it, and it should be Megan. There she is, because that's who I was logged in when I did it. So this is basically it, right? So now, if you had a bunch of tenants, right, like this, where we started, if you will, was you had sort of your home tenant.
I did.
And inside of there, we had the app registration, which is the little tic-tac-toe board with a little cube next to it. And then we also had the enterprise app or service principal, which is the little Rubik's Cube with the little green thing. That is also in your tenant. So everything was in one tenant, which is great if you're deploying it for a customer, just one-off. But if you want to scale it, you need to do what we just did. And what ends up happening is that each customer or client gets its own service principal, but there's only one app registration. So if later on you change the app registration, no problem. You just change it in the home tenant. People are going to maybe be asked for an additional consent, but they're not going to have to worry about any other details. It's still really under your control. The other thing to kind of point out is if you're testing, it's just a tip. If you're testing your consent logic, you might want to force a consent again. And I remember for a while there, I would register a new app every time I wanted to test, which got really old really fast. The trick is just come in here and delete. It may be scary. Make sure you're deleting the enterprise app or the service principal and not the registration. But you can come in here and delete it, and it doesn't actually delete anything except for the consent. So that will force the consent again. And you can try again and again and get your little pop-up working or whatever it is. So that's it.
This is brilliant because I did not have to package things up. I did not have to write scripts, PowerShells and things like that. I just had to give the app, and the app does everything, right? That is just brilliant. Exactly. So that's the benefit. And maybe for our folks here, for our audience, we do have a trick question. So if you are in the M365 developer space, and if you've used Microsoft Graph, now that's a clue. You're probably using a browser-based tool, which is a multi-tenant app. So comment in the comment box below and let us know if you know the answer.
Yeah, and if you can, go into your enterprise apps. If you figure out what the answer to Rabia's trivia is, guess what? You'll be able to find that multi-tenant app registered to Microsoft inside of your enterprise applications. So
you're being nice. You're giving lots of clues now.
Well, it's a nice way to kind of show that it's really working, though, because you don't, even without registering it yourself, you're going to see a bunch of Microsoft apps on that list because all of the first-party apps work exactly the same as the app that you just built.
Awesome. And we're going to give a thumbs up to the correct answers. So it was fun talking to you, Bob, as always. We should come back more with more code, decode. Do you have yours with you?
Yeah. Let's decode it for everyone. And thanks everybody for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And if you subscribe, then you'll get notified of all the new videos that we're working on that are going to come out over time. So thanks so much for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.